All right, looks like it's 2 o'clock. Hello and welcome to the U.S. Registry of Exercise Professionals panel discussion on the top 5 ways to use medical fitness to expand your business. My name is Francis Neric, and I'll be facilitating the discussion today. I'm the current president for the Coalition for the Registration of Exercise Professionals, also known as CREP, and the Associate Vice President of Certification and Credentialing for the American College of Sports Medicine. As a quick background, the mission of CREP is to secure recognition of registered exercise professionals for the distinct roles in medical, fitness, health, and sport performance fields through a managed registry at usreps.org. CREP is a coalition of 6 member organizations: the American Council on Exercise, the American College of Sports Medicine, the College of Strength and Conditioning Coaches Association, the National Council on Strength and Fitness, the National Council on Certified Personal Trainers, and the National Strength and Conditioning Association. usreps.org represents over 180,000 registered exercise professionals for the unique job roles in personal training, group fitness, medical fitness, clinical exercise physiology, and strength and conditioning. Today, we have an incredible slate of panelists. Mike Stack is a faculty lecturer for the University of Michigan School of Kinesiology. He's the creator and host of a wellness Paradox podcast, and is the founder and CEO of Applied Fitness Solutions. Michael is an exercise physiologist by training and a health entrepreneur, health educator, and fitness industry advocate by trade. He is dedicated to enhancing the practice of and advocating for fitness professionals to ensure that they become an essential part of the healthcare delivery system. David Flench is the president and CEO of Medical Fitness Association. He has 25 years of experience in the health and wellness industry, working for healthcare systems such as Hancock Health, Sarasota Memorial, Baptist Health South Florida, and Ohio Health. David obtained his MBA from Franklin University. His bachelor's degree was in concentration from exercise science from The Ohio State University, and several certifications from fitness healthcare organizations such as the American College of Healthcare Executives and the American College of Sports Medicine, demonstrating his expertise and commitment to the medical fitness community. Graham Melstrand is the Executive Vice President for Community Health and Wellness for the American Council on Exercise. He serves on a number of boards and committees, including the past president for the board of Coalition for the Registration of Exercise Professionals, CREP, and a past president for the board for the Physical Activity Alliance, PAA, and the California Fitness Alliance and the Special Olympics Fitness Advisory Committee. As a last bit of housekeeping, this panel discussion will be recorded and sent to all registrants. Please be sure to ask your questions by clicking the Q&A button on the bottom, and we will answer your questions at the end of the sessions. And without any further delay, let's dive straight into the discussion. All right, so I think we're going to ask the first one is related to the market opportunity. I'm going to ask this question to Mike. It's what is the business opportunity in medical fitness for the fitness center owners and operators?
Yeah, thanks, Francis. And I'm glad we're starting here because, it's often said in business, if it makes dollars, it makes sense. So we have to start with the actual business opportunity here. And this is something that, as a fitness business owner in the commercial space for the majority of my career, I've really contemplated quite a bit lately and realized, and I think many of us who are on this webinar probably realize this, that we target 15 to 20% of the American population. And we've done that fairly consistently throughout the history of our industry. And we'll get into this as we have this conversation in the webinar a little bit further, but we've only targeted that 15 to 20% of the population largely because of a lack of trust with the other 80 to 85% of the population. So getting into the medical fitness space by developing relationships, by developing competencies, by producing outcomes really allows you to start to expand your market share into that other 80 to 85% of the population. We're not going to get everyone, and that's not what anyone on here is saying today. There's going to be a certain part of the population that's never going to engage with us. But if you just purely think of it from a market share potential, if you open up a new fitness facility in a town and it's the standard fitness industry messaging and marketing, you're just taking members and clients away from the other fitness facilities in town. We haven't increased the size of the pie. We've just divvied it up more. What medical fitness does, and David will speak to this much more specifically, from his role as the president and CEO of the Medical Fitness Association, but it actually starts to open up the pie more. And even if we can capture another 5, 10, 15% of market share, that makes a substantial difference in the success of our business long term. So the bottom line, from my perspective, as someone who's a commercial operator who's making the transition to medical fitness, is that this is the way for me to get out of kind of the race to the bottom of trying to beat all the commercial facilities from a marketing and a pricing perspective, and open myself up to a demographic that's underserved, or in some cases not served at all.
David, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, well said, Mike. And you know, talking about the business opportunity, I'll just go back. Before I came to MFA, I was the director of Hancock Health's wellness centers. We got a new CEO at one point, and similar to the phrasing that you used, he came up and you know, we had done all kinds of great things at that facility by that point. And so, you know, our mission was very clear, but he came up to me and he said, "This is all great, but without a margin, there is no mission." So there absolutely needs to be a great business case for doing something like medical fitness. And so that can't be understated at all. You can't have a losing operation and still be considered successful just because you're running medical fitness programming, etc. I would kind of echo Mike along the same lines as what he was saying. Differentiation is the key word to me when we're talking about business opportunities. So, you know, and Mike nailed it on the head. 20% of the population is already active. They're already fit. They're already athletic. And those are the people who it's not difficult to get them into the doors. And everybody's kind of, you know, telling them why they need to come to your center. Well, you know, how about that other 80%? And so to me, you know, one of the big things that we worked on was really looking at what the environment looks like. You know, how intimidating is it if I've never been a member of a fitness center before? What I see when I walk in those doors. So, you know, creating that environment, we went along the lines of the physical building, you know, from carpet in some areas instead of the hardcore, you know, rubber matting in all areas, or even the layout. You know, what are the first type of equipment that somebody sees when they first walk through the doors, and then, you know, from the standpoint of even selling, you know, hard sales, you know, is not the way to go with a lot of this demographic, you know, taking them back into a closed door office to sell them until they say yes. You don't let them go. That's not going to be, you know, the right environment either. So I think you have to think about what that, you know, maybe new demographic for you, what, you know, who they are, and how to make them feel more comfortable, to get them to engage in a new activity. And once you do, now you have opened the doors to such a, you know, a wide opportunity of new clients that your competitors aren't touching right now.
Graham, what are your thoughts?
Well, you know, I agree with Mike and David. I think one of the unique value propositions of medically based fitness and hospital-based wellness is the brand burnishing that comes as part of the promise of that. There's an expectation that it will be clean, that the staff will be highly qualified, that the programs will be there that address the individual's health and wellness concerns, and that it'll be an environment that isn't about the traditional vanity benefits of or sometimes even the sports performance benefits of exercise. So people associate the hospitals in their community with quality and service, and an expectation of a better experience in many cases.
Awesome. I think we're going to go to the next question, and we're going to be talking about kind of leveraging the framework provided by medical fitness associations. And so I think this question is really kind of starting with to Dave. What resources exist to assist in developing and implementing medical fitness programming?
Sure. Yeah. So there are a lot of resources. It's really why the Medical Fitness Association exists. Our purpose is to advance the knowledge, networking, and influence of the medical fitness industry. So, we provide industry standards, educational programs, certification opportunities, benchmarking data, professional development, and networking opportunities. And so within all of that, that's what our members get. We put out resources like the Medical Fitness Standards and Guidelines publication. We just got done with our 3rd edition revisions last year, so that just is probably about 4 months into the making. So that's out there, and that's really, I would say, one of the best resource guides to what the medical fitness model looks like. Really goes through all the different chapters of what we believe is very important. So I think if somebody, we get this all the time. People are looking at, all right, well, we don't want to maybe jump both feet in today, but we want to, start to learn a little bit more. We have, our webinar series that's no cost to even non-members. But to our members, we offer CECs with that, continuing education credits. Lots of opportunities on that side. When a person joins our association, a lot of times, especially when they're requesting this, we'll match them up with an industry veteran, somebody who's been there and done that, and can kind of show them the ropes that way as well. I take on a very hands-on approach as a president CEO. I want to, be a resource. I have so many years experience running these types of facilities that it's very easy for me to kind of talk the talk with our members. So whether it's somebody part of a hospital system that are trying to implement medical fitness within their centers, whether it's commercial fitness center owner or operator, those are all types of people who join MFA and are looking for this type of resource. So yeah, that's really what we're all about.
So I guess I'm going to pose that to you, Mike, on this one, is just like understanding the framework MFA puts out. How have you used that sort of framework to build out trust with the healthcare system that you are in Michigan? So if you can explore that a little bit.
Yeah, and David is being incredibly modest with the resources that the MFA provides. I will say that they basically provide the playbook, but more than that, it's the relationships and connections that I've made with the MFA that have allowed me to do what I'm doing. So we're transitioning from a commercial fitness facility to a hospital-based, healthcare partnered wellness center here in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and it was through connections that I made by way of David and the MFA from, Doug Reibley, who, basically has been involved in so many of these projects around the country, and other resources. I see David Evans is on the webinar, Brad Rohr is on the webinar. I mean, these are people that I've been able to come into contact with through the MFA. And, David said it a second ago, when you become a member and you're interested in certain things, it's just a simple matter of reaching out to David or Mary Ann at the MFA and saying, hey, I'm thinking about this. Who can you connect me with? And they connect me to the appropriate person in the ecosystem. And I think for commercial operators that are looking to make this pivot in part or in whole, because to be clear, like not everyone needs to pivot all the way from a commercial center to a fully, healthcare integrated type of wellness center. There are kind of gradations in between. The MFA has connections with people in the ecosystem that can help point you in the right direction. And so I think that that's one of the strongest suits of the organization. I'll also point out in terms of, other resources that exist, the ACSM has just recently redone their exercises medicine credential. And if you haven't seen the most recent iteration of it, it's very well done. ACE has their medical exercise specialist, very well done. I mentioned David Evans from Cooper that I see on the webinar. Cooper has some amazing turnkey medical fitness programs that already exist that you can use. So there's a lot out there. And I think for me, the MFA has been the lens that I've been able to filter things through because, David and his colleagues have so much experience. I could tell them the problem I'm trying to solve. Heck, even the architect that we used to do the block plan for my center here in Ann Arbor came through an MFA connection. So it's really kind of cuts out a lot of the legwork that you need to do once you just get into the ecosystem. And then there's all the tools that you have access to.
Awesome. I think we can go to see the next question on here.
On that, Francis,
Graham,
though, I
you
do
go
have
first.
one additional comment
Please.
on that. So I think one of the most critical pieces of this, as it pertains to the resources that the MFA provides, is that in the fitness space, they've always had this aspirational goal of being that resource at the intersection of clinic and community that can provide the programs, leadership, and expertise for people to live their healthiest lives or to manage or prevent inactivity-related chronic disease. But there's been kind of a crisis of confidence in some ways on the part of referring professionals, whether they be physicians or physical therapists, and a little bit of uncertainty about what might be delivered in fitness facilities because of the very broad range of facility types and orientations, and consistency leads to quality, and the facility standards and guidelines deal with everything from the physical plant to the emergency procedures, staffing, and other best practices. And then, of course, there's the voluntary certification program that's the companion that ideates what's essential, including the medical oversight and the programs that's delivered, and what's recommended. And as Mike pointed out, that is really the roadmap for facilities that have aspirational goals of moving in that direction, and that's particularly important in the context of the work that the Physical Activity Alliance is doing to bring that standardized measure for physical activity into the EMRs and set up a referral framework and scheme. The confidence that goes along with being able to point out these are the standards and guidelines and recommendations, and we follow them, it will be critical for operators.
And that's a great segue into I think our third question. And Graham, I'd like you to explore a little bit about the work from the Physical Activity Alliance. And when we talked about programs, delivering quality programs that are delivered by qualified professionals or highly qualified professionals, I want you to explore that a little bit. So my question to you is, what should you be looking for in terms of credentialing and qualifications for the exercise professionals that will be implementing these programs?
Sure. Yeah, and would you like me to do that also in the context of what the requirements are, recommendations are then from the MFA then too? So
That's correct.
Perhaps the best place to start is with just a little bit of background on CREP and US reps. A number of years ago, following some high profile incidents, the exercise professional was under some increased scrutiny by policymakers and others. Were they actually qualified? And of course, there are organizations like the ones that are represented on the webinar today, and the other members of US reps that were offering exercise professional certification programs vetted to the same standard as many of the other adjacent health occupations: dietetics, athletic training, occupational therapy. And there were still some concerns about kind of the confidence and competence of the practitioners. So we got together to build a registry of exercise professionals that had been vetted to a uniform standard around the third-party accreditations from the NCCA and ISO that are typical in those adjacent health occupations, and to provide a voice and a platform for all of these, and they very much align with the requirements that the Medical Fitness Association has for hiring in their facility certification scheme, which is current credible certification from an organization like yours and in ours, but also, depending on the position, academic requirements, bachelor's or master's degree in exercise science or a related field. And that's an expectation when you look at it in terms of medical fitness. The consumer and the hospital network that is associated with it expects that individuals will be hired at the highest level of education and training, because many of the individuals that they'll be working with are impacted by one or more health conditions. And with the registry, part of the process is making sure that not only are those individuals qualified with current certification, but can we verify that in advance of hire, and on an ongoing basis, just like maintaining CPR, AED, first aid training, and the other emergency training. And so for us, with the registered exercise professionals, in order to be on the registry, you have to have that current credible credential. And with the work that the PAA is doing, after you have that that standardized measure for physical activity included in the EMR, anybody that's eligible, which quite frankly, when you think about it, according to the Preventive Services Task Force recommendations, if you're at risk for cardiovascular disease and have one additional risk factor, which could be simply your age, then you would qualify for a referral to an exercise program led by a qualified professional. And ideally, those programs would be outcome based around your particular condition. But the registry is set up to follow that referral. And the PAA's built what's called a National Exercise Referral Framework that includes all of the qualified providers of physical activity programs and interventions. And it's organized based on how much physician oversight is required for that particular patient. So some of the facilities within the MFA have cardiac rehab as part of their programmatic offering. At the early stages of that, those individuals actually require the direct supervision of a physician. And then, of course, if you have a health condition, it could be physician referred, athletes are physician cleared, and everybody else falls into that physician recommended category. But it's set up as a continuum to match the level of education and credentialing so that we're able to preserve the triple aim cost, quality, and access. Those are the individuals that David's organizations recommend as the right level to hire. And we support that positive verification at scale for their facilities.
Awesome. From an employer perspective, Mike, what do you think about that from when you're looking at kind of building that trust and continuing that kind of conversation? How do you look at the registry in terms of your hiring practices?
Yeah, on some level, the registry is a little bit of a cheat code, from a hiring standpoint. I mean, we all know right now the challenge that exists from a labor perspective in our industry. And, I'm sure everyone that's on this webinar right now, and, we both panelists and attendees, we all hear the challenges with labor. If we're looking for one central source of information to go to find professionals that are credentialed through reputable organizations, I think the registry is the place to go. And, I think it's something that I saw a question come up real quickly in the chat that said, hey, how is the registry getting promoted? Well, that's what, US reps and webinars like this are intended to do. It's promote it, but it gets promoted through its use. Not only are we using it to potentially source candidates, but also to verify that they're maintaining their certifications as we go. And, as Graham was alluding to, if we do want to make this movement onto the healthcare continuum as exercise professionals, we absolutely need a registry where all the qualified people are housed. And there's also a way for us to verify that they're maintaining their continuing education. So if we think of the three-legged stool of moving us from just fitness professionals to healthcare professionals, one leg of that stool absolutely is a registry that is used by all reputable employers in the industry, particularly employers that are working with the medically compromised populations. I not only want to know that my professional has a credential from one of these organizations, but that they're also keeping that credential current. And I quite frankly don't always need to rely on them for that information. I can go to the registry. So for me, the registry is an access point to see the qualified professionals that are out there and ensure that they're maintaining their credentialing per the requirements of the certifying body.
Yeah, and that's a trust but verify element, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it helps us as employers, be able to kind of, cut through the administrative burden and just go to one place to access the information. And, we should say and I'm sure this would get brought up at some point, but if you are certified by one of these organizations, by, ACE, ACSM, NSCA, and so on, you're already on this registry. So, I mean, I'm an ACSM EP, I'm on the registry. I haven't paid anything to be on the registry. ACSM is paying for me to be on the registry. So if you're listening to this webinar and you're certified by one of these organizations, you're already there.
Well, you do.
And if you're not, you should check your renewal status.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
That's right. And I think that's that point well taken, Mike. I think it's just like when you're talking about registration, there's a purpose of registration. And I think that's the part where, especially when you're trying to build trust in healthcare, you got to use Apple. You have to do apple to apple discussions. Like when we're talking about education, certifications, registration, they all have to mean there's specific meanings to those. And so when we're making kind of advances in promoting and doing outreach for our professionals, you have to use like terms. And so, Dave, what are your other thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, and Graham and Mike hit on a lot of these, but from the standpoint of the medical fitness model, I would say professional staffing, highly qualified staff, is foundational to the model. And just as throughout my career, I really put a huge emphasis on not only hiring the right people, but continuing education over the years, because things change, new things come about. And just a little anecdote on that, you may be thinking, well, geez, that's expensive to do. Well, CFO would come and say, what if we pay for these staff to get certified and all of these things, and then they leave? And then the CEO comes and says, what if we don't pay for it and they stay? So, having the right people from the get-go with the right degrees and certifications to start off with, and having a way to check that with the registry, I think is super important, and making sure that they stay certified, stay current with the current education and knowledge in there. The Medical Fitness Association dedicates an entire chapter to professional staffing, and really goes through many of the most important positions within a facility. And as it was indicated before, has the pass-fail standards, has and the other standards on education and certification for each of those positions. So you can see those either in our standards and guidelines publication or on a checklist that we provide on our website. But it's very detailed. So we are talking about the accredited certifications for each type of position that we're evaluating when we look at a facility that's putting into place the medical fitness model.
Great. And I think this is kind of the next question kind of alludes to one of the questions in the Q&A, but I'm going to kind of rephrase it a little bit. The question is really kind of related to referrals. And so I think for Mike and Dave, if you can address it from Mike's perspective as an emerging kind of medical fitness side, how are you kind of building that referral network, that stream there? And then reflecting that back to Dave, if you can address that from the opposite side, as a clinical exercise director that you've in your past lives, how did you build that referral network into your system? So I'll start with Mike first.
Yeah, I mean, I think fundamentally this boils down to trust, first and foremost, and we've all alluded to this to varying degrees. Largely, I mean, at certain points in our past, there have been, either individual bad actors or, organizations that just, haven't done things in alignment with what would be considered a medical model. And unfortunately, in a field, you're never judged by the best of you. You're always kind of judged by the worst of you. So I think we have been kind of cast in this category of this, caricature of kind of the big meathead in the gym that just wants to help you, get jacked or get ripped for summer. And so we have to start to disabuse, people in the medical community of that notion. And it comes by, building trust. And I've talked about this at great length. And so I'm going to try to, truncate this into kind of my trust building framework that I've used. and who I've used it with. Primarily I focused on primary care physicians throughout the course of my career, certainly now as we're making this move towards medical fitness, even more so, largely because, they have a limited amount of time to work with a very, very large number of people, and they have a lot of problems that exercise professionals can help solve. And I've built trust with that community really through, 4 primary pillars. One is just the appearance of myself and my team. I always tell people, the first impressions are lasting ones. So everyone on my team dresses like the medical professional that primary care physicians are used to working with in the exercise space, which is a physical therapist. So polo shirts and dress pants. We work to speak the same language as medical professionals, which is so important. We have the competencies, and we talked about competency a second ago, and there was a word that came up that Graham said, and David alluded to it as well, and I think it can't be understated. It's producing outcomes. Ultimately, at the end of the day, the best way that we have built trust and a referral network with primary care physicians or other people in allied health is we've measured baseline data. We've implemented a program. We've measured that data at the end of the program. We've shown the outcome measures, and you've reported those outcome measures back to the physician. Nothing builds more trust at the end of the day than showing that physician or that healthcare provider that you can produce outcomes. And it starts small scale and it builds. I'll say this and then I'll turn it over to David. From the commercial space, this is a little bit of the long game. It normally takes me 12 to 18 months to really develop a solid referral relationship with a physician's practice, because they're going to want to dip their toe in the water. They're concerned with malpractice. They're concerned with what some of the untoward consequences of referring somebody to a professional they don't know. So, I start very basic with education for the physician and their patients, and eventually we bring that down to their referring. But ultimately, the way to keep that referral pathway strong is you're producing outcomes that are clinically meaningful, and you're reporting those outcomes back to the physician.
And Dave, what are your thoughts on that? Kind of thinking back to your clinical exercise director days.
Sure. Yeah. And Mike, you just hit on so many big things, but I completely agree. Trust from the provider is essential. You can't not have that and expect to get people referred to you. I think, a lot of people are, they don't know how to talk to providers, physicians, and other healthcare providers. I think the easiest place to start is look around within your own facility. I guarantee you have some doctors who are working out. Not all of them are going to want to talk to you. Some of them are going to want to keep their headphones in and just do their own thing. Others will want to. I've had it in every facility that I've been in, and it's one of the easier places to start. And maybe you're just asking questions of them and finding out, what would it take, what would be important for your patients if I were to ask you to refer them to here. And, one of the things that we found was as we were looking at how to do this through our electronic medical records, the EMR through the hospital, was, how do we make it part of their workflow so that it's an easy and efficient thing to do? And what we found is when we first asked our IT department to build it into the EMR, it was in an area that they never went to. They never clicked into this. And so, that was not part of their workflow. So we had to work very hard to get that to happen. Now, not everybody's going to be able to be part of the EMR. So there has to be other ways as well. Even if you're part of the hospital, you may be trying to get referrals from a doctor outside of the network, a physical therapist who's independent and is sending them to you, some other healthcare provider. So there has to be other ways to do it as well. I think one of the things that we found a lot of success in is actually going a little bit what I would consider the back door of the patient. And so, the patient wants to be in our medically supervised program. Okay, well, give them the information that they need to know so they can take it back to their doctor and tell them, hey, would you make a referral for me to this program? And that starts to educate the doctor a little bit more. I'd also go right along with that is saying the gold that you can create from positive, positive experiences with those patients and those members, those participants within your programs. That feedback, that positive feedback that they come back and they say, hey, doc, I just went through this program. It was awesome. This, and this happened to me. I loved it. Thanks for sending me. Yeah, I can't pay for anything better to happen to get the doctors to start referring more to us. So there are a lot of ways to do that. I think, you can highlight some of these individuals with these great outcomes, and that helps do it. Mike talked about outcomes. I think, not only from an individual standpoint, but in an overall programmatic standpoint, that can be very powerful. I can remember sharing with a doctor's group how one of our programs, we found over a year's time, the outcomes for blood pressure reduction were better than what they were seeing from their medication, prescribing medications for their patients. So I think, things like that can really start helping open the doors for referrals.
Awesome. And I think we can go to the next question. Graham, did you have anything else to add to that? Because I do want to explore triple aim.
Probably there's two additional things on top of what David and Michael have suggested, and that's really having those outcomes-based programs, ones that are structured that the physicians or referring professionals can see how they're made. They're time bound, if appropriate. They're one to many, and they're low entry costs that could be available to members and non-members. You mentioned earlier on the good work that Cooper's doing with their Cooper tracks, but you also have some other ones that are out there. The medical director for the ACAC clubs in the Mid-Atlantic have the prep program, physician referred exercise program, which is a 6-week, almost an orientation, if you will. And they have a second version that's a prehab for older adults that are going to be going through a joint replacement, and both of those have terrific measured outcomes that they can report back, and they're delivered by qualified professionals. That combination really can give the referring professional a lot of confidence because they know what to expect and what's going to be delivered.
Awesome. And I want to explore something a little bit more, Graham. I think if you can stay on as kind of thinking about kind of the triple aim, and I know you spoke about
Sure.
it a little bit earlier. So when we're thinking about kind of programs versus people, what are some important things to consider from a programming perspective when implementing medical fitness?
Well, you don't need a lot of programs. Exercise is absolutely shown to be effective every time that it's tried. But from a marketing and communication to a referring professional and a patient or participant, is you have to speak to who it's for and what they can expect. So there are some logical big buckets on that. If you're looking at chronic disease, diabetes prevention is one, hypertension. If you have older adults, balance and fall prevention, weight management, pre and postnatal are all ones that are appropriate. Our Arthritis Foundation has some terrific programming that can be adopted and brought in as well. So you're really targeting those big buckets, if you will, of the type of conditions and concerns that individuals have. You also want it to be time bound. If you think of it in terms of a periodization model, if you're working on anything from a 4, 6, or 8 weeks, people understand what their total commitment is on that, and they always have the opportunity to continue or to change those programs. We always encourage operators at ACE to consider offering those programs for non-members as well, not making it conditional to membership, so people can participate in that program. And quite frankly, if our facilities and our professionals do a good job, people stay. So those are the things that that I think about, and also education opportunities. If you're looking at it in the context of participant and provider, if you can show your competence by offering educational programs for members and an orientation, if you will, for those physician members of facilities or potential referrers to where you can come in and explain philosophically what you're doing with your facility, how you're staffing the programs that you're offering. It improves that confidence portion of that.
And David, what are your thoughts on that? When we're talking about like your referrals within healthcare individuals versus programs, what are your thoughts on kind of exploring that programs versus people?
Yeah. So I think first, physicians and other healthcare providers, they're not as comfortable, selling a membership for you. They're not going to, be the advocate for membership at a fitness facility. A program though that addresses your specific needs and your concerns, that is oftentimes much more successful in doing so. And a lot of times when people are starting out in the medical fitness programming space, they want to have everything right from the start for every population, and that's just not doable. I think it's important to really focus on maybe one or two from the very start of things and build as you go along. So that was always our approach. We wanted each quality to be each program to be very high quality. And we ended up with, probably by the time I left, was a good dozen programs addressing a variety of different chronic disease conditions and other health risks. And everything Graham was saying, you absolutely want to make part of these programs, but to try to throw out sticks at a time probably isn't the most successful strategy. I'd say really find out how it works in one or two, and pick those programs based on some of your community needs, what you're seeing in your facility, what you might be hearing from conversations with physicians and other healthcare providers of what they are struggling to manage. If it's I can't manage my diabetic population. Well, okay, that's an opportunity for you to put some programming in place for that. And then as time goes on, starting to add to that menu of programs per se.
How about you, Mike? What are your thoughts? Oh, sorry, Graham, I'll cut you off.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, because David triggered another thought, don't when you can, if you can have an interdisciplinary delivery on that. You mentioned diabetes. If you have the opportunity to bring together the dietitian and the exercise professional and even better, the physician as well, for a hybrid delivery, that's an opportunity to build cooperation and to produce good outcomes for participants.
Yeah, and to
Go ahead.
so as I said, to piggyback on that, when I think of this from an economic model standpoint, on my end, and so as you guys are listening to this as attendees, developing one of these programs with the right kind of economic model, we don't have time to unpack all that right now. Realize that if you do this right, particularly in a group-based setting, if you can pull in aspects of a multidisciplinary team where you do have the RD and you do have the physician there, and you're spreading cost out in a group setting, you could actually offer a very, very high quality program at a relatively low cost. And that's how you should price it. I don't, and David, I know that you align with this. These are programs that kind of turn, cost of acquisition into, kind of neutral acquisition costs. So we might get somebody in on one of these programs that's very high quality, multidisciplinary team. Maybe we're charging them $75, $100 a month for a program like that max. And maybe we don't make a lot of money off that program, but what we find time and time again is 7 or 8 out of 10 people convert over to membership after they've completed the program, and they start with a better foundation. They stay longer as a member, and all of us know from a business model perspective, our centers make money off membership. That's how we make our money. So these turnkey programs initially that you can use when people come through the door, if you structure the economic model the right way, acquisition will stop costing you as much money. If anything, it will just flatten out to be neutral, and then you'll make your money on the back end from a membership retention standpoint.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think that's the really kind of underscore, I think a lot of the programs, it's the multidisciplinary component, right? So interprofessional is another way this I've heard of also described is just like how you build that trust is like you're integrated within the team. And I think that's the part where I know it's not in the medical fitness side, but when I was coaching a master swim team, you end up having really deep relationships with dietitians. You would have deep relationships with when we used to work with the Runners Roost way back in the day, just like, how do I find the right shoes? It was that network that you had in building that sense of trust within your kind of a customer base. I know it's a little bit different, but I mean, kind of similar. I know we have about 15 minutes till, so we're going to open it up to some questions, and thanks for our panelists for doing that. I have a couple of questions that came in through the Q&A. Please continue to ask those questions that are there. Let me start with, okay, so there's a couple questions related to education and building trust within the industry. So I think one of them is related to continuing education. So how does continuing education work in the space when you're talking about professionalism? I know, Mike, we talked about a little bit about making sure you're using the same language when you're talking to the healthcare team. So how does continuing education or professional development, how is that used to increase professionalism in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go first. And I'm sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's absolutely essential. I mean, particularly if you're looking to build these relationships with medical professionals, the bottom line is that, and we all know this coming out of academic programs for exercise science, at this point, there's not a strong component of developing knowledge related to medical terminology or even, chronic diseases in your standard, academic programs. And so continuing education is really where you get that, and making sure you're getting it from reputable providers of that continuing education. The company like ACE, company like the American College of Sport Medicine that actually certify these education providers. In my experience, when I say this as somebody that teaches at a university, we don't prepare our students exceedingly well at this point for working with a lot of the special populations that they would work with in medical fitness centers when they leave the doors of our academic institutions. In a lot of cases, they're getting that from continuing education and from mentorship in the field. So I think it's absolutely critical. And I'll use us as an example. We require that all of our staff get ACSM EP certified, but then they're required to go on and get the kind of credentialing and continuing education necessary for working with the medical fitness population. So I think it's essential because undergraduate academic programs only can go so far.
And here's the other thing is, I think, sorry, when we're thinking about education, for education, I think when you're looking at kind of occupational credentialing broadly, not just for the fitness industry, there's two different types that you have. The education is how from a formalized education perspective, what are you learning at a university to prepare you for the workforce? And then there's continuing education and professional development. The continuing education professional development is kind of separated into two different types of buckets. One is continuing competency. How do you know once you're certified, you remain competent over time? And that really kind of ties back to your knowledge, skills, and abilities once you're originally certified. So making sure that you're taking the education that you need in order to continue to be safe and effective. The second part of it, from a professional development standpoint, is as you're starting to hone your skill sets as an exercise professional, you're taking an advanced training in order to meet the needs of the populations you work with. So when you're talking about that, usually that's called credential stacking. So on a credential stacking standpoint, it's being able to have advanced training or specialized training to work with that population. And sometimes you'll hear that in nursing specialties that you have that specialized training because you didn't learn that in school at the time, but now you work with a specialized group, and now how you do that. So you stack your certification with a specialized training that's there. That's
so you stole one of my thunder points there,
yes.
Francis, is around continued competence, but there's a big difference, as you're pointing out, between competent and successful. And then you could add an additional element as it pertains to the facilities. So as part of that facility certification standpoint, MFA certified facilities are required to provide professional development opportunities for their staff. And that shouldn't be an amenity of employment. That should be relevant to the direction and future needs of the facility and its members or participants. And developing an area of specialization is a recipe for success in terms of your financial future. If you're looking at it from a professional perspective, but probably more importantly is what are the needs of the population that you're going to serve, and choosing those areas where you're both passionate and authentic in that, and there are so many opportunities to serve a medical fitness community by honing in on one of those areas associated with chronic disease and or lifestyle. And you do want to have that in a structured and disciplined way to meet your own personal growth needs, but also those of your employer. Those should be negotiated together.
Yeah, great point there. I'll piggyback on that. Each year back in my former position directing these types of facilities, we would budget. The whole budget process is where a lot of this kicked off. What type of programs are we looking to add? Okay, well then what type of specialized training is that going to require? So I can remember maybe 5 years ago when the health coaching started to get extremely popular. We wanted to get more into that space, so we budgeted for staff to go do that. It was part of what we wanted to do. To Graham's point, it was more of an organizational goal of ours to be able to provide that. But we did not yet have the expertise among the staff. So in order to build a program, it was also building up the staff's credentials. So a lot of times it's directed by the facility, by the organization of, what are the ones that are out there that will help run our programs, that will help generate more business, more, members coming in through the door that we can help.
The next question is related to the registry. And I think maybe you could start with Graham, and then we'll kind of go around about kind of like the networking with our healthcare community. How is a registry promoted to customers or the medical community? How can they get referrals from this registry? So I'll ask that.
Sure. Well, there's two parts of this right now. One, the registry really is, it has been built to this point to serve as a positive verification of those credentials for referring professionals, employers, consumers, and payers. So that's its primary purpose today. As we're moving forward at the PAA with that HL7 work, there is going to be an element that's part of that, where we're filling the what's called the FIRE requirements for the workforce, where the referrals that would be generated would go there to that group of individuals to serve as is kind of that society, if you will, for the qualified practitioners. Right now, we don't have the ability to generate those specific referrals to individuals. That is an opportunity for a future build. One of the things that we've done more recently is the NCAA has adopted some interassociation guidelines and recommendations for strength and conditioning coaches that we developed side by side at the NCAA's request for the strength and conditioning coaches that specify education, credentialing, required perishable continuing education. And so we'll be working towards adding the academic attainment on that. But again, those are going to be at those occupational roles as opposed to looking at the areas of specialized training or ongoing education that have been consumed.
And I agree with that, Graham. Also, I think a lot of the work that US Reps is doing and the Physical Activity Alliance is doing, it's the behind the scenes component of getting the healthcare professionals and connected in with the qualified exercise professionals. And that's really kind of the connection of the education, certification, experience, and the level of need of or risk of the client or patient. I think that's the big component of how the PAA is working with HL7. And then also, how do you refer to the appropriately qualified professionals that deliver these effective programs? So I think that's one of the big components there as well.
And there'll still be a physician as the intermediary on that as well. Those physicians are going to have relationships with the professionals that they refer to, or the facilities that they refer to that employ the professionals. The registry really serves as that kind of like the roller coaster, you're tall enough to ride.
Yeah. And I guess it's like, I want to go one level deeper and talking about kind of a national exercise referral framework, Graham, and know that we've kind of discussed this, oh gosh, for the last probably 15 years or so. And then kind of in Ireland, that there is a national exercise referral framework, but they ran into some challenges with implementing that program, and kind of that referral from physicians to the qualified professionals. I wanted to know if you can explore that, and then we're going to kind of go through some other questions that are coming in as well.
Sure. So we're actually in the US modeling that exercise referral framework off of the good work that was originated in Ireland. And the challenge that they had there is they had great buy-in from their National Health Service on how that referral matrix was going to work, from physicians and rehabilitation professionals and dietitians up and down the chain. The challenge that they had is that when they said go, they didn't have enough practitioners and enough facilities to meet the need, and enough programs. So, we're taking a little bit more cautious approach as we build these things out in the United States, so that we make sure that we build all of the infrastructure, both the behind the scenes, the technology-based portion of this, and do the good work to work with organizations like the Medical Fitness Association and other trade organizations in our space, but also do the advanced education around that. And if there's areas of opportunity right now where there's some exposure, in my opinion, it's probably that there are not enough of those outcome-based programs that are ready for adoption by facilities and practitioners to meet the potential need. But we're only at the start of the third year into this 5-year program, so it's going to take some time, and it won't be just turning on the lights, if you will.
So we have time for one last question, and this is like really to Mike and to Dave. They were curious about experience with co-locating clinical facilities, for example, exercise, physical therapy, medical diagnostics, et cetera, and challenges faced with stricter standards for healthcare facilities, for example, infection control, COVID mitigation measures. So to Mike and Dave, how would you address that?
Dave, I'll actually defer to you on this, since this is more you, but I will say, for me in my venture with the healthcare systems, I have been insistent that there's maximal co-location of clinical services, primary care, imaging, PT, ICR. It has to be there if the medical model is going to exist. David, you could get a little more granular on it.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll start with the second part of that first. Having the strict standards, I think is great. I think, when I'm expected to follow the same cleanliness standards and infection control and all of these, risk management standards, people notice that the members of the facility, they notice how clean you are. Your facility is. They notice, your response to emergencies, and how you do handle all types of risk. So I think I believe those aren't really challenges. Those are more opportunities to further differentiate yourself. But in terms of co-locating, I think it's the ideal medical fitness model involves co-located services, co-located medical services, clinical services, and really, everyone benefits from that type of situation where, and the third facility that we built was designed especially to take advantage of those types of things. So one main entrance, and people would, coming in for their doctor's appointment, would get exposure to seeing what's going on in the medical fitness center, and vice versa. I don't have a doctor. Oh, we've got a doctor right in this same building. Or, you can take the example of a physical therapy clinic that is on its own, that has a room of, 2 bikes, 2 treadmills, a couple other type of machines, and that's what they get to use with their patients, versus coming to a medical fitness center and they've got sometimes a pool, and they've got a ton of equipment, and they've got all kinds of space. and really the fitness staff gets to benefit from bouncing some, advanced ideas off of the therapists, and some continuation of care for those patients after they're done with therapy. I mean, I could go on and on about the benefits.
Warm handoff is a big benefit too, right? You build that relationship and you can pass people up and down that continuum because it's the right thing to do for the patient / participant.
Absolutely.
And unfortunately, we're out of time, friends. This is like, I know when we've kind of connected in person, it's just like, man, we can nerd out on this stuff all day. So unfortunately, we're out of time, and this concludes today's webinar. I want to thank our wonderful group of panelists, Graham Melstrand, Mike Stack, and David Flench for your time, expertise, and invaluable professional insights. And thank you to all attendees for your time and attention. We hope today's conversation was informative and invaluable. Should you have any other questions, feel free to email us at info@usreps.org. CREP's next webinar is in June. We'll be announcing the topics and speakers on our next social channels and newsletter soon. Be sure to visit usreps.org and follow our latest updates on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. Look forward to connecting with you all soon. Thank you all, and
Thank you,
have a
everybody.
great one.
Thank you.
Take
Thank you
care.
for having everyone. Bye-bye.
Yep. Bye.